Tracy to open with the Karakia. Thank you, Tracy.
Takataho ki te uru, whakatakatau ki te tonga, kia mākina kia uta, kia mā taratara ki tau. E hiaki ana te atakura, kio ki hoka auhu kei mauri ora.
Tracy, do we have any apologies? No, I'll move they be accepted. We don't need to. Confirmation of the agenda. Jennifer, second, thank you. Chris, those in favour? Opposed? So carried. Any disclosures of interest for any of the items today? No.
Just wanted to make a few comments on our agenda today. So, submission subcommittee use in an agile way. Sure that council are that we place date the committee. Resource management submissions today. You've got very different. We've got a submission that has been directorate, then the science directorate on submissions we make to pain. Only submissions that we make to the finance business services submissions we make to draft annual plan. So as we would put it only, we would put an annual plan out. People will make submissions. We obviously make our territorial authorities and sometimes our neighbouring. Again, the submissions, each directorate collates the input into those submissions. So with submissions on the annual plans, Haven will be presenting those on behalf of the directorate. They incorporate comment from. There are 3 quite different submissions for you today. None of these submissions coincided with either a strategy and policy meeting or a council meeting as of the closing date of this.
Thank you, Tracy. So the first one we have in front of us today is the WRC submission on charging our future.
Nigel King, the team leader in the Regional Transport Connections Directorate. He is not Julie Hanson.
Kia ora, Chair and subcommittee members. Thank you for that introduction, Tracy. That takes away the awkwardness. No, I'm not Julie. So Julie offers her apologies. She is the report author and the author of the submission that is in front of you today. However, I have been briefed on this one and happy to take any questions. So I don't have any particular presentation, but just by way of some background, this is a submission to the Ministry of Transport, who have recently released the Charging Our Future document for consideration. So that's a draft long-term electric vehicle charging strategy for Aotearoa, and contains five key areas that they've sought feedback from. And we have a number of submissions a number of points through that submission that we would like to make. It is, just to note, generally supportive of that document. There are just a few key areas that we thought could be strengthened through our response, including a greater clarity of the roles and responsibilities of local government versus central government through this work. We would like to make sure that local government entities aren't put in a position where they're expected to provide electric vehicle supply equipment, and so that is quite important for us, just to make sure that we've got that point of clarity. And we want to make sure that from a location perspective, there's no disadvantage as to the location of charging infrastructure, so that all communities can be supported. We also would like to just emphasise through this the different requirements for heavy vehicles versus the light fleet. This submission, certainly the Charging Our Future focuses more on a transition to electric vehicles for the light fleet, but we know that as we progress, we're going to need to do more in terms of providing for electric charging infrastructure for heavy vehicles, as that will contribute significantly towards reducing transport emissions associated with freight transfer. And with that, through you, Mr. Chair, I invite any questions that members might.
Thank you. I'll kick off. Can you just outline for me who from WRC was involved in that Waikato Regional EV Network infrastructure working?
Yes, certainly. So, in fact, we've got a member here in the room from a governance perspective. So, Councillor Nicol has been involved in this one. Councillor Angela Strange has also been involved in this process. At a staff level, I have been involved, but also my team member, Julie Hanson, the key that report, has handled the interaction at the technical working.
Councillor Nicol?
Yeah, no, main thing I wanted to say is mentioned and just well done for getting everyone in exactly what and I've heard other that before. So seems to me as with reduced duplication, people, and we've gotten to a point where we've questioned that, saying we've got more knowledge on this than. So I just feel really proud of it. And the 2 points I thought I had noted down when I read through it was, since we do have that knowledge, to them available. But where it makes sense. And the second one was, there are some points towards where I thought it that infrastructure is roads with going in a direction. Had to be a
Story?
Thank you for that. I was heartened to see paragraph 10 and 11, just highlighting some of the fragility that is in our national grid and generation supply. I think that the Cyclone Gabriel highlighted can be at times. And I'm concerned that might be putting the cart before the horse in terms of planning for EV, not making provision for generation and transmission. So thank you for including those. Just so I understand, are we just with this submission? Are we just talking about those charging sites that are somebody kind of like you fill up your petrol tank, as opposed to somebody charging they get to their dwelling at
Yes,
Have I got
yeah.
that
So
right?
so there's probably two aspects to that, because in just there's a lot of different knowledge around the room. So they look at the DC charging infrastructure. So those are the fast charging that they've often for en route facilities. But you can also get benefit from having the AC charging at the end of destination. So that might be where you've got a vehicle parked up for for some time. So this one has primarily looked at what we are doing to support in-transit movement, it feels at the time. And that's where some of the recommendations here look at actually how can we do better for some of these areas and make sure that we're addressing, I guess, all aspects of our community and usage. So looking for, I guess, more normalisation of transport charging infrastructure too, so that it gives everybody that option. So yes, it does primarily focus on journey type charging, but there is also a role here for it to play for charging at the end of your journey too, when you might be parked up or going to a particular facility charge also. So that's where we'd like to see a bit of strengthening come through.
And I would support that strengthening, picking up on the point that Councillor Nicol made, that we have very clear direction, central government not requiring off-street parking and not requiring developers to consider where these vehicles will charge if we do put all of this great infrastructure in place. So I having a conversation before the start of this meeting around repeating central government direction and wanting to make sure that where there's an opportunity for us as a council to highlight where there might be conflict, we should do that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair Warren. Just a couple of points. It's 19. Yes, that it replacement of the battery. And that to me, that clause actually last sentence get to. It should not be subsidised. Goes against councils trying to stop it. So there seems to be quite a rhetoric in here as to what we're trying to. I challenge any household budget and electric. Some of this is the other point I'd like to make is today that the courthouse lucky we're in a new courthouse are having to spend $2. So there are unintended consequences. No, it's a mixture. Clause 19 does call.
Yeah, Nigel.
Oh, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, just so I can clarify in terms of the response that we've got. So my interpretation of clause 19 is, as we have it there, is the use of smart charging to help take off load from the network. So it's looking at, I guess, stress on the network, and so it's looking at smart charging, not to incentivize its use or to benefit any one group and take away the disadvantage from another, because it's looking, smart charging would be something that a more affluent household has access to than a less affluent household. So I'm just wanting to check, because one of the other aspects of this the submission is that it doesn't want to put local government authorities in any position to be providing sort of the supply equipment, the electric vehicle supply equipment. So we don't want to be in that position. We note through this that actually the provision of charging infrastructure and its supply is best met by the market. So we won't take on any local government. We are not proposing to take on any local government responsibility to subsidise transport. So I just want to make, just in case others had a similar view, I just want to make it clear that we're not in that position to subsidise.
Standard situation regarding most vehicles have got certainly opportunity for commercial operators. Certainly not so.
Thank you.
Chris, just as a matter of clarification, are you, that clause 19, is that on page 13? That you look at that, which is actually our submission. Thank you. Councillor Nicol.
Yeah, on that, I actually had a note in paragraph 19 as well, because it didn't make sense to me when it said, however, they are less likely home charging due to the cost of connection. I think what you meant to say there was smart charger, like a special thing on the wall to
Yes,
make it work all better.
correct.
I mean, a lot of people can just plug in to
Yes, they
a
can.
household plug.
I think the
and you
intent
could
for that.
put a timer on that. So
Yeah.
there are ways around that without.
Yes, correct. I think you're exactly right. We can provide additional clarity on that one because we were looking at probably the 7 kilowatt installation units for home charging, but again.
And
happy
I don't think the last sentence adds thing to this. I'm happy to take.
Can I
Be
just
fine.
clarify specifically low cost public charging is needed in low-income residential areas?
Yeah, so
Okay,
happy.
strike it out.
It doesn't have to be.
Thank
The
you.
last two sentences. So.
I hadn't read that other one. So.
And
Works.
just as a point of vehicles and systems to
Some do.
and read the power.
Yeah.
Somebody else worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, the purpose of paragraph 19 is really good. We do need to manage peaks because that's what's causing us a lot of grief in New Zealand. So there should be various ways around that. So if we make that change to smart charging clarification and take out those last couple of sentences.
Thank you.
We cover in our submission, obviously, climate legislation, significant stuff like that, but I don't see anything. Have we done anything around cost and our role going forward? How do we see our role as regional council going forward? Those infrastructure they're looking to put in around the country.
Yeah, a really good question. Thank you. And one thing I should have highlighted earlier, and it was actually something that Councillor Nicol just alluded to, was the opportunity that we have here to actually really demonstrate that actually the Waikato region has been leading the country in terms of our ability to coordinate local authorities. So one thing that the Waikato Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Working Group has looked at is providing a list of online resources that provide guidelines, infrastructure reference, so that we can actually coordinate how we respond to the installation of electric vehicle charging infrastructure in public spaces. So when we took an original of this to the Ministry of Transport, they were unaware and asked us for access to it. It will be published very shortly, and we will be making it available. And I will to show that we can. The submission to show that we can actually provide that. So it's actually because we moved early. We anticipated a need. The Climate Action Committee had a significant interest in this space, as did the Regional Transport Committee. So there's a lot that they can actually take from the position that Waikato has already prepared. So we are very happy to make that available to others.
Likelihood of any costs coming back to the council?
No, it's already been pre-prepared.
I just noticed that Stephen,
you're living.
Yes, and that it is interesting, and occasionally you do see images of this pop up online where it's occurring overseas. There is a note on this within here where we're looking at the location of hubs that are within a radius of a particular settlement type. So making sure that there are on-street charging options available to those households. So they don't necessarily need to be parked immediately in front of their home in order to charge, but it is still accessible to them. So it would look at the density of housing within an area and then provide on-street infrastructure to support that. So it's, again, one of the things I probably didn't highlight earlier is we are really looking for a stronger understanding about the fleet composition, location, and what we need. So data is going to be really important going forward. So having good ready data will help us to understand where those locations need to be, but we're definitely not advocating just for charging outside your house and running the extension cord out, but more provision of available charging networks that people have access to in the event that they don't
Just
have
to figure-
off-street parking. No. Probably it's the planning aspect of it that would be most important. We certainly wouldn't be in a position to contribute to the infrastructure, but if we can support the planning and location of that through again good data and understanding, it would be within the local authority's jurisdiction, so the city or district council, as to the location of those. But we would support that with data if we have picked it up from a centralised source, and then encouraging private providers to locate at those areas. Thank you.
Nigel, I got a really sort of left field question for you, and you may not have the answer. Just, is there anything going in the Ruakura inland port in the way?
Excellent question. It's something that I'm actually going to be looking into. And again, that probably comes back to the concept of how do we support longer distance freight and heavy vehicles, and they have different charging needs to what the light fleet does. So this submission primarily concerns itself with light fleet charging, but the next stage that we're going to have to look at in terms of electrification and decarbonisation will be for the heavy vehicles, and actually that is a question that we are pursuing actively at the moment to see if we can locate those charging in that sort of
Thanks, Nigel.
centre. Thank you.
That is here that discussion today. These outcomes. Is turning the enforcing ability in the grid. That there are the heating and the development some of those unintended count identify are unintended that may occur. And lastly, to
I just make an observation. I don't believe it's just the exactly the same issues according to charge 2 Tesla. New Zealand is going to
efficiency of
loading. And Warren can explain it. I don't know what the
Yeah, you find with the Tesla smart chargers that equate to a house load of power. You can't have a house load and a half. Yeah, and the support, yeah.
I just have
Councillor
one
Dubber.
question, which is, Waikato.
Just in terms of where those
Where the
charging
charges
sites
are,
are,
we know
yes,
where
yeah,
we're serving.
we have been mapping that,
Is
yes.
that going in?
I don't think it's part of the submission as such, but it would be available as part of the supporting information that we're going to be putting online as part of our suite of tools. In terms of charging locations, we've got good distribution across the network, but it can always be better, I think. And so it's probably now we're getting down to that final level of detail about how do we service within our communities. I think certainly the journey charging along key routes is being well provided for. If you look at Wakatahi's information, there's a rapid charging unit approximately 75 kilometres, every 75 kilometres along our state highway network. And again, we're looking probably at actually how do we provide additional options and normalise it further beyond what's already there so that it actually caters to sort of end of journey facilities and normalising electric vehicle charging. Yeah, but to answer your first question, relatively good, but they can be better. And one of those areas where we can be better is charging at institutions. You'll note that there was a specific request through the submission to ensure that key destinations like public hospitals and others have charging facilities available, both for the use of public, but also community transport providers or others that access those locations on a regular basis to again make sure that the lack of charging facilities is not a barrier to the use of electric vehicle uptake.
It's one thing I looked into, Ben, and there are a huge number of agencies that provide those maps. There's agencies that provide those. I think the key to it is the fact that of capacity. Come back, a lot of those stations, you can charge 2 cars at a time, like Crystal indicated, but you cannot charge 3. There you go. You might pull up and you're an hour behind the next guy. You know, that's the key to it. So we have a motion in front of us. Clause 2 just allows us to insert those items that Tracy's just mentioned and gone through. So we have the support that the submission document be received, and then that it comes back to myself and Tracy with those changes to inserted in there for that delegation of that. So do I have a mover and a seconder? So move, thank you, Councillor Story, second, Councillor Nicol. Those in favour? Opposed? So carried. Thank you,
Excellent.
Nigel, for your
Thank you.
presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Committee.
So councillors, do apologise in terms of just the timing of putting the agenda together. You've got some in the old format and some in the new format, so just keeping you on your toes. So we have Miffy and Trina who will be presenting this agenda item.
Thank you, ladies. All yours.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you for the introduction, Tracy. If it would be helpful, I'll run through a quick summary of the proposed plan change and the draft submission, and we'll then be happy to take any questions. So Miffy has just shared a plan of the site that we're talking about. This is the proposed structure plan, which I'll talk through in a bit more detail as I go on. So proposed plan change 15 is a request by Tainui Group Holdings, TGH, to change the Hamilton City District Plan. PC 15 proposes to rezone approximately 68 hectares of land in the Ruakura structure plan area to allow for housing. The plan change site, known as the Tuumata block, is located on the eastern side of Wairere Drive, which you can see in the left-hand side of that map, between Fairview Downs in the north and the Ag Research Campus in the south. The majority of the site is currently zoned Ruakura Industrial Park, but as part of their planning for the wider Ruakura area, TGH has identified the site for rezoning to residential use. This is recognised in the latest version of the Future-Proof strategy, which identifies the site as a greenfield growth area to be developed for medium-density residential within the next 10 years. The main changes proposed by PC 15 are rezoning most of the site from industrial to general residential zone, which is shown in the darker yellow in that image. Rezoning part of the site to Business 6 zone to provide for a new neighbourhood centre, shown in blue, and adding this new structure plan and associated rules for the Tuumata residential precinct into the district plan. The proposed changes will enable the development of approximately 1,200 homes on the site, supported by the neighbourhood centre. A large portion of the site is also proposed to be set aside as wetlands and swales to manage stormwater, and the structure plan also identifies a potential location for a future primary school. Turning now to the draft submission. The draft submission is generally supportive of the proposed structure plan and plan change provisions. It notes the plan change is consistent with the location and timing of development anticipated for the site within the Future-Proof strategy and proposed change 1 to our regional policy statement. The submission is also largely supportive of the plan change from a transport perspective. PC 15 is generally consistent with regional transport plans and policies, and the submission notes that the proposed walking and cycling connections will support public transport well. The submission supports a number of provisions promoting the creation of a multimodal transport network within the site. It also supports provisions that encourage best practice stormwater management and the use of sustainable technologies, and that give effect to Te Ture Whaimana, the vision and strategy for the Waikato River. The key recommendations or amendments sought within the submission relate to public transport, ecology and biodiversity, and land drainage. To promote positive public transport outcomes, the submission recommends that the plan change provides for higher density development around public transport nodes on frequent corridors. It also highlights some staging considerations for public transport as the site is developed over time. In terms of ecology, the submission seeks further detail regarding management of mudfish on the site and recommends that further assessment be undertaken to better understand the use of the site by long-tailed bats. It also recommends strengthening provisions for bats and their habitat to meet the direction of the regional policy statement. And finally, the draft submission highlights the need for an assessment of effects in relation to any potential overflow towards Council's drainage scheme to the east of the plan change site. That concludes my summary of the submission. I do note that there are a few typos and numbering errors in the version of the draft submission that went into today's agenda, which we do apologise for. If you're happy for us to tidy these things up, we'll make those changes before the submission goes to Councillor Marr and Tracy for approval. The only change of any substance is that in points 26 and 39, I recommend changing the term subdivision consent application to resource consent application to be more encompassing. Thank you for your time, and through you, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to take any questions.
Councillor Hughes?
Can I just ask, do Regional Council concerned about reserve fund contributions, particular contributions to required subdivision, totally different industrial recreational facility? part of our mandate to question or not?
Come to Tracy for that.
Great question. No, it's not part of our mandate. Unfortunately, regional councils are unable to require financial contributions under Section 108 of the RMA. It's entirely a city and district council matter, which I think is a failing of the Act, but at the moment that's how it stands. This training that we've done in conjunction with Hamilton City Council and Whānui Group for at least a decade, and I know there has been long and extensive conversations between and Whānui Group Holdings Limited. I would think once subsequent Section 223 and 224C subdivision plans are lodged, that is when the financial contribution conversation will be had between Hamilton.
Tracy, I can only say I hope City Council have learned something from it. Nice. We fucked up. Totally.
Councillor Story.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just touching on submission point 28 around the drainage, because I find myself reflecting on some of the issues that were experienced out in Tacoma. And I see that we've got oppose in part, and the relief is to provide an assessment of effects. Is there, if they do an assessment of effects, is there then a requirement to address them? Given what you just said about that we don't collect any developer contributions in support of changes to our drainage networks, is there an obligation?
I think the submission point that we've written around provide an assessment, I think that should give scope if there is something identified through that assessment that would create an effect on Waikato Regional Council, that there would be further work required as a result of that. And then there would also be later on at resource consent stage also requirements at that point to do assessments of effects, and then there comes into it the potential for there to be affected parties if there is something identified as an effect on the regional council.
So at this stage, just during this plan change, we're just asking them to assess it when they come to apply for the consent to go ahead with this development. That's a further opportunity to say, based on that assessment, we now require you to do types of things.
Great.
I would love to see language that was a little bit stronger, but okay. No, and just so also, so I'm clear, where's the new motorway on this you're showing us? It's the red line.
No.
Is it the red line? No.
So the red line is the proposed Eastern Transport Corridor. This map that Miffy has just brought up now. Yes.
Yeah, but now I'm looking at that black line and trying to remember where the.
So
Okay, so a fair distance? I
yes.
just am thinking about the commentary on the Bay of Plenty bus tour. Residential subdivisions right near that motorway and complaints about noise. And I know they've come to me as a counselor. But I'm just, so I don't know, do we feel any need to make any commentary on that about?
Just in regard to that through the matters in relation to, there are generally very, very clear provisions that are for those people who are building close to motorways and haven't perhaps built there yet. So effectively a buyer beware. And then there are also responsibilities on, say, a developer or a waka kotahi in this to ensure that treatment of the payment reduces impacts people who may already be there. So it's a case of who's first as to where the responsibility. Going into an area and building and there's already an expressway, the response generally are that's the environment. This is, I would think, of sufficient distance away such that they would, again, those are matters.
Thank you.
Councillor Dunbar-Smith.
Somewhat whimsical comment, but given that we've just, should we be sitting on the need for EV infrastructure where they have the shopping centre and whether there's
Through you, Mr. Chair. There are, I believe, some provisions proposed in the plan change already relating to vehicle charging infrastructure. Hamilton City Council do also have an existing plan change underway that they're running, Plan Change 12, which makes wider changes to the district plan. That also proposes quite substantial changes to the transport chapter. So as that plan change progresses through, that will also have impacts across residential zones across the city. So we haven't included any points seeking further changes, but we have a submission point that supports some of the provisions that they've already proposed around electric vehicle charging.
Councillor Clarkson.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to speak. I'm just an observer, obviously, today. I just want to congratulate the staff on the section on ecology and biodiversity, environmental impact assessment component. The top-rate piece of work. It covers off all of the key points. And one typo I did note, you've probably noted it already, is the spelling of Munga or Nua Gully. I want to correct. Apart from that, it's top rate. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, Bruce. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you, Chair. Just a building require residential development or innovation, which is either close to motorways or double glazing minimums, glazing, down deadening technique. Sure, they will be.
Thank you, Chris. Are there any other comments? Right, the motion we have before us, one is to approve the plan B, the proposed private plan change 15 be received, and secondly that it comes back to myself and Tracy after those typos and figures are altered and fixed up. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Seconded. Councillor Nicol. All those in favour? Opposed? So carried. Yes.
So now, councillors, we've got Haven who'll take us through, as I said, so these are submissions to annual plans, usually or sometimes depending on the number of annual plans we have, we'll have a raft of these submissions. We're limbering you up for the LTP process because not only do you get to hear people who will have points of view about our LTP, but we will have points of view that we would like to share with our territorial authorities, probably this time next year on each of their LTPs. So these are just those annual plans that have come in, Haven. I'm not sure if this is all of them or just the ones that we've seen today. Over to you.
Thank you, Tracy. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and councillors. So yes, this is the annual plans that the staff have assessed as ones that we would like to make submissions on. There were other councils that are consulting. However, these are the two that were of interest to Waikato Region. In terms of the report, it's quite brief and concise, so I'm keen to take that as read if it's okay. The only thing that I want to call out in there is that we note that the submission periods have closed. Since then, Waikato District Council have extended their consultation period, so it's still open, I think, until so we're still within that consultation period. And then in terms of the two submissions themselves, they're also relatively brief and concise. For Aotearoa Lakes Council, it's really just around requesting the continuation of that $7,800 contribution for virus schools so that program can continue to run within that district. Waikato District Council, it's really just to support the work that they're doing in that area and noting that if a targeted rate is established, we'd be keen for it to be informed by best practice, and that's looking at all the different kinds of restoration activities that could be undertaken within that area, rather than just say only focusing on planting trees. So those are the bases of the two submissions. They were informed, as Tracy highlighted, from across the council. Our area was just essentially pulling them together and putting them into the report. So we do have staff from the different directorates who inform those available in the room and online as well. So yeah, we're also keen to understand if any councillors would be keen to speak to these submissions at the hearings. Aotearoa Lakes Council have given us a time slot, 3:05 p.m. on the 24th of May, and Waikato District Council have now confirmed that their hearings will take place on the 8th of June. Yeah. Happy to open up for comments, discussion.
Haven, has that been relayed to the relative constituent councillors? Offhand?
We haven't reached out to them individually, no, but I can do that. I believe
I would say that would be the format, otherwise by the time they hear about it. Ben.
Page 45, I'm assuming I'm reading correct, but it looks to me as that should say submission from the Waikato Council to the Waikato District Council. The heading. Waikato Regional to Waikato District.
From Waikato to Waikato.
Yes, correct. It should say that. Apologies. That's
And just on that same page, you mentioned basically spreading funding for predator-free Timahiri over groups. Is there a reason why, rather than supporting one group that's currently doing it?
I might call in the subject matter expert. We do have Nikki online. I'm not sure if you're able to speak to that comment. My understanding is Nikki has also got the information from her wider team, but would be keen to understand if you're able to take that question, Nikki.
Thank you. I can try and answer it. So the submission or the proposal from Waikato District Council was for a targeted rate to go to one particular community group who's been carrying out work in the area for a number of years. And our suggestion in the submission is that it would be preferable to see the target rate that's actually linked to specific restoration activities, so not just pest plant control and planting of native trees, but also incorporating other community groups that are working in the region who are undertaking, for example, predator control. And obviously for overall ecosystem restoration, predator control, as well as the pest plant control and planting of native trees is an important component.
So this is just an observation from us as such. I'm just struggling to get my head around if there's something that has been missed out and the gully's there, or, yeah. So, okay, it's an observation from us that we would perhaps like to see other groups doing different work that's been done currently. Am I reading it correctly?
There is other work already underway in that gully. So the proposed targeted rate from Waikato District Council was just to distribute that money to one group where there are multiple groups working in the area. And an observation from us in our submission was that we would prefer to see it distributed on a basis of activities, i.e. spread out amongst the groups doing activities rather than just being given to one particular restoration group.
Thanks, Nikki. I think we have a couple of councillors in the room that can help me add to it. So, Councillor Clarkson.
Yeah, I just wanted to support it the way it's written, because one of the things that's evident in the text there is the need for a and I think that's really that's going on in all of the components. And yes, Tamahiri pest control group, fantastic job. Pest control is just one aspect of what needed to be done to restore the gully. And so again, I congratulate the staff on this. It's exactly the way it should be, and it's encouraging as well. It does just get that little overlay of a plan.
Thanks, Bruce. Councillor Hughes.
Can I just ask about the targeted rate? Who is going to be targeted in the funding of affected groups? In case of ratepayers.
They do provide a map on their website. Actually bring that up on the, it'll be related to who's benefiting from living nearby.
Okay, so it's the group who are supposedly benefiting. Excellent work. Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Chair, it would be confined geographically to the Tamahiri Gully system residents.
Thank you. Any other questions for Haven or Nikki? Right, the resolution we have in front of us is that the report be received, and we have that as in two pieces, including to be voted on together. And that is that the Rotorua Lakes Council draft annual plan piece be done, and also the Waikato District Council annual plan piece be done. So I have a mover. Thank you, Chris. Seconded. Thank you, Pam. All those in favour? Opposed? So carried. Thank you very much, Haven and Nikki online. Back to, no, I'm going back. James is going to finish off with the Karakia for us.
Unahia mai ti uru tapanui, kia waitia, kia mama, kinako ti tinana, ihenagro, iti ara takatu koia ra I rongo, e whakakaria aki ki rongo, kia tina humie huie taikie.
Thank you, James. Thank you, staff and councillors. That's us for the day. Meeting closed at 3:56.